right, hello everyone. I'm Mike Thompson, and not the first time I've been the one standing in the way between folks and lunch. So we'll make the best of it. It's a bit hard to see, but I'll do a show of hands. How many people, this is your first time hearing about P2PE in the context of the PCI Council's P2P standard and program? Do we have any new folks? Andrew can't, he's ineligible. So it looks like we got hardly any hands, so this will be good. And I really couldn't be in a better position today with essentially 3 back-to-back sessions about P2PE. And so thank you to Tony from Target, who used a lot of the vocabulary that you're going to see on my slides today. And so by the end of this, everyone's an expert. So if you saw Andrew's presentation earlier, where he looks quite a bit different from his picture up there, the more years go by, the less I recognize the young gentleman up there. I know that that gentleman did not have arthritis in his knee and did not have shoulder injuries and sports injuries, and it was easier to get around on stage. But let's talk about something that has aged well, and that would be P2PE. So it's been quite the journey over all these years. Version 1, and we have Lauren involved with version 1. That was all the way back in 2011, 2012 with 1.0, 1.1, up until 2015 when we published version 2 and introduced, and it's a word we've heard today, the P2P component construct, which I will talk more about. All the way till 2019, we did the v3.0 release, and we improved upon that model and made other changes to the standard and program. And so where are we at now? Well, so 3.1 is the latest release. That was back in 2021. And so it's been a few years, and we just did some program updates that I will talk about and has been mentioned. So that's where we're at today, but folks also like to know, well, anything on the horizon? Where are we going? Anything? Do we get a little something for being here? And that little something will be P2P v4.0. So I'll briefly mention that, but there is an objective on the horizon, and we're continuing to move. We are busy, busy, busy. We like the work. We like the engagement. So we're not stopping at the program enhancements that we've done. We are also working on a major revision effort. So I won't belabor this slide because everyone's an expert at this point, but suffice to say this is about the simplest explanation of P2PE. There's obviously a little bit more to it within the standard program, but essentially it's the use of a PCI-approved POI device, a lot of acronyms there, that accepts the card data, encrypts it, transmits it so you don't have clear text account data going through that merchant environment, and it goes all the way to a secure backend environment where it's securely decrypted. The most salient point I want to emphasize for this slide, and this is oft a point of confusion and not unreasonable since we do have a lot of standards and programs, the P2P standard and program is very much the assessment of that P2P product, and it's actually a generic term that we use is P2P product. It's not an assessment of merchant locations that are using the solution. That's handled elsewhere, for example, in the DSS arena, you'll hear things about SAQ P2PE. So the P2P standard and program very much focuses on that product that then propagates to a listing that we have, and Tony talked about that as well. I love this slide. If you've been around for a while, you've seen this a number of years ago, back in 2019 actually. The P2P component construct has been amazingly successful, and like I said, it was introduced in version 2. What that is version 1 that you see in the green, the original P2P solution standard was a monolithic standard. You had to assess the whole thing. The only thing that got listed was that full solution. In version 2, we introduced P2P components, the items you see in purple. So what components are, it allows folks to assess to a subset of the standard, but the advantage is to get listed. So it's always been the case that a solution provider can outsource to third parties, but the component construct allows those entities to get listed. That listing is good for 3 years, and in that time, it's a one-to-many relationship. Those components can get integrated into solutions, and Tony talked about this in the benefit, without having to be reassessed. Whereas if they weren't listed, they'd have to get reassessed in every integration into solutions. So it's of amazing benefit. And then what you see in the blue there, the light blue, is in P2PE v3, and this is slightly nuanced. We added 4 new component types, but they're kind of sub-component types. So you see them attached to the encryption management, to the KIF, the key injection facility. What we did, based on stakeholder feedback, which is going to be a theme throughout this whole event, is we sort of bifurcated those 2 existing components and kind of split them in half and added an additional layer of flexibility with a bit less requirement. So perfect example for KIF, we kind of split it into 2 to where we still have the KIF, but you could also assess just a part of it where you're just doing the key generation, or you could assess the other part where you're doing the key injection. And that just added another layer of flexibility. And to illustrate how popular the construct is, this is a breakdown of all the listings. I don't show the P2P applications on here. We have a third category for P2P applications that run on the POI devices. But you see, we have 124 total solutions. And those solutions, or any new solutions coming through, can use any number of these listed components. So this represents the validated components out on our list. And you see by far, KIF is the most popular. The ones with the lower numbers, those are the newer ones. They haven't been around as long. But we have a lot of listings. And again, all of these in aggregate can be used as building blocks to help assemble a solution. And again, great dialogue from Tony talking about the benefit of being able to do that, whether it's a solution intended to be listed or it's a merchant managed solution that we refer to as MMS. Again, a theme. None of this really is possible without stakeholder feedback. And we did an RFC for P2PE v3.1 last year. We also have a number of channels. Andrew spoke a lot about the different engagement opportunities, and Deanne and Gina this morning. So many channels that we get such great feedback, and that doesn't exclude in events like this, where it really helps shape the direction of these standards and programs, and P2P most definitely is not an exception. So we did an RFC last year. We know we want to do a major revision, but we also know we didn't want to wait to do some program-related updates such that they did not require updates to that standard. And as folks know, it can take some amount of time to do a full major release of a standard, but we knew we could expedite those enhancements to the program ahead of that. So a little bit of an appetizer, if you will. I think what we'll see, it's a little bit more than that. But again, we wanted to get that out, get folks benefiting from this, whether they're current participants or they're going to be soon-to-be participants, hopefully, in the P2P program. And so we just updated all these documents just last week, quite literally last Wednesday. Right now, it's 4 documents. I'll go over those real quickly, but we do have some additional ones. We have some ROVs. Those are our reporting templates. We have some MMS, so merchant managed specific documents we'll also be updating very soon. But for now, what we have are the updated program guide, the attestation of validation. It's a very important document. It's used for literally every submission for P2P. Our updated P2P instruction manual, Tony talked about that. That's what goes out to the merchants that instructs how to sort of follow some guidelines and adhere to ensure the security of that solution implementation in the merchant environment. And we have a new change impact template. And Alicia, thank you to Alicia for writing an excellent blog post. We have the QR code there, and we have that out. Hopefully that works. If it's up, I don't know if it's up on there, but either that or you can go to the news page on the council website to read more about that. So a lot of work went into this, a lot of benefits to these new documents and the features that they provide. So we hope folks go out there, download those, start using them, read them, and if you have questions, please do reach out on those. If you're like me and you go to a restaurant, you probably want to sample everything on the menu. It's why I love dim sum. It's why I love tapas. But sometimes that's not practical. Today is no different. We had a 2-hour P2P assessor session just this last Friday. I spent almost the 2 hours talking about what you see on the slide here. This is a lot of abbreviated speak here. It's a little bit more nuanced, and it'll resonate with folks that are participating in the program now. But I do not want anyone leaving here intellectually starving. So this will have to suffice between now and lunch, which is only about 10 minutes away probably. So let's cover off just a few of these. POI device testing. So if you don't know PTS, Pin Transaction Security, the genesis of that standard and program, a little bit of a misnomer now, but POI now replaced PED, so point of interaction device. So those are the devices we talked about that are in the merchant location. We had requirements that required quite a bit of testing for those devices, not duplicating the testing from the PTS program, but just ensuring that they were appropriate for the use in the P2P solution. And some of those are around SRED, if you're familiar with that, secure reading and exchange of data. Those are the additional requirements in PTS POI that govern the protection of account data. We issued, actually, it's in the updated program guide we just put out, but even months ago, we knew how important this was. This was one of the top items of feedback. We wanted to revise the sampling criteria that relates to testing in the P2P standard, and so we put out a technical FAQ. And we do use that technical FAQ mechanism to put out interim updates like that where it makes sense to do that. So we have a P2P technical FAQ document that encapsulates that, as well as the updated program guide. And this is a significant revisement to the required sampling and aka testing for POI devices. So please do read that, especially if you're a vendor and you weren't aware of that. We will continue to message this. It's that important, and it's to everyone's benefit as well. Another one that really was at the top, this is a little bit nuanced, is the support for symmetric and/or asymmetric keys. This is particular to P2P components. So to allow the very seamless integration of listed components that I talked about, there's a bit of robustness on the front end. And that robustness in this context has to do with everyone basically being assessed to the same baseline, such that when you look at, for example, use a KIF, it's the easiest one. You look at a KIF, it's kind of like a KIF is a KIF is a KIF in terms of the requirements that they assessed against. And so we didn't have a mechanism where we could allow sort of deviating assessments and the use of not applicable in that assessment. And that is what makes it different from sort of a one-time audit or annual audit. That was talked about earlier as well. This is good for 3 years. And like I said, it's a very seamless integration to take these components and put them into a solution. However, this wasn't meeting the needs of industry. Everyone said, look, we got to revisit this. We got to try and change this. We have changed it. So component assessments now can use not applicable. You can support one, the other, or both. We have mechanisms to track that. There's attributes that are essentially in the portal for the submission. It'll propagate to listings. So this will be a new listing attribute that you'll see proactively on P2P component listings going forward. But this really should allow that flexibility that folks were looking for. Third one there, P2P application deltas. When folks did a delta, that's a change to something that's already listed. It had this feature, if you want to call it that created a new listing, had a new reference number. Those are unique identifiers. But what it did is had an unintended side effect, which made paperwork and consumers of that application, it made it a little bit more difficult than it needed to be. So now what will happen is if you do a delta to add a new version, so for example, you have an application listed, it's 1.x, you want to add version 2.x, it just amends the existing listing. What that means is that reference number, that unique identifier stays static, and that means paperwork and consumers of that application, it's a more seamless use, and there isn't as much paperwork or change that needs to be done or submitted. So that should be of great benefit. Quickly, sort of commensurately, component reassessments. If you reassess a component and it's to the same major version, it will retain the reference number, and that's a kind of a commensurate benefit in terms of paperwork and consumers of those components. And lastly, we have the AOV, the attestation of validation. Things like an AOV don't maybe seem all that important. It's a document filled with attestations that relate to literally every submission for P2P and an assessment. And it's used in 4 different ways: new assessments, deltas, administrative changes, and annual revalidations. It's very important. We made that easier to use. We cut down information. You no longer have to populate in there. For example, you don't have to duplicate the POI information from the ROV into the AOV. We streamline the sections. All of the nice buzzwords to just make it easier to use, make it easier to submit. And even more so, we did analytics on what were the top reasons that they were being returned. And usually it was missing signatures and also some missing attestations. And there was a little bit of ambiguity there, to be honest, that we resolved. So we wanted to cut down on that because no one wants their submission returned. No one wants delays. We don't want to do that. And so, again, this isn't updates to the standard, but this benefits everyone. It benefits people that are currently participating, and it benefits those that will be hopefully soon participating in the P2PE program. In addition, I'll mention, if you have something in flight, if there are any people out there that are doing P2P work now, and you got the AOV off for signatures, feel free to submit the one that you had, but within a few weeks' time, everyone has the incentive to use the new stuff. So that's it for program updates. Again, I could talk for hours. I guarantee most people are happy I do not have 2 hours to talk about that. But I will be available the whole event, so please do track me down if you have more questions on the program enhancement that we've done. But quickly, and again, I know folks are getting hungry here, what do we have to look forward to? If I could shake the magic 8 ball and read into the future, and I hope everyone saw Andrew's presentation, just a great overview of the direction of the council over the next few years and the standards and where we're going to the target objectives. So a great benefit if everyone saw that. So for P2P specifically, where we're going, as I mentioned, is P2PE version 4. So a major revision, and that always includes all the program collateral as well that needs to support that. What exactly that looks like, I don't know. We have some ideas. I'm going to talk about number 1 on the next slide, but other things that have come up from stakeholders is, how do we increase participation and adoption? And that's a great question. It might seem straightforward, but these things are sometimes that extend beyond just making updates to the standard and program, whether it's engagement opportunities and getting more people involved. When Andrew asked everyone, and I'm really picking on you, Andrew, I like that you're in the front row. It's a great prompt for me. How many people participate in RFCs? I would have also expected a bit more hands, and I'm hoping next year that we do see more hands. And if you're not able to participate in RFCs now, reach out to the council, figure out how to get involved. It's absolutely paramount. Again, we're going to revisit POI devices. Can we make further improvements from the standard perspective, not just the program perspective for POIs, whether it's the requirements, the test procedures, et cetera. We're also going to revisit the component types. You saw we have 8 of them now. Are they still fit for purpose? Are the requirements that are attributed to those component types still meeting the needs of industry, or do we need to fine-tune that a little more, a little bit of calibration, if you will? We've also had feedback of, hey, you got a lot of components. Why don't you add one for remote key distribution? So in the standard, we have an ancillary set of requirements if folks are doing remote key distribution, but it's kind of a bolt-on to the other component types. We don't have a standalone remote key distribution, so that's something to consider. We'll see. And another thing that's come up, and this just has a light touch in the P2P standard, are P2P application signing requirements. So we've got a few requirements, but we've been asked, hey, can we improve that? Can we consolidate it or have a more definitive section? And so by no means is this exclusive. This will all be evolving over time. And as I mentioned, absolutely paramount to get involved, have your voice heard, get that feedback in, because it most definitely drives the development effort, the revision effort for these standards and programs. With that, to put everyone at ease, this is my last slide. But it is a highly important slide. I'll pick on Andrew one last time. You've heard Andrew talk about key management. This has been a prominent topic over all these years. If folks don't know, and Andrew did mention this, P2P essentially has almost the entire PIN standard inside of it. So domain 5 in P2P essentially is the PIN standard, just slightly tweaked for P2P purposes. And so folks are saying, look, we sometimes participate in both P2P and PIN, but we got this separation here. As you know, we have a lot of other standards as well. Most of them have key management, which includes all the associated processes, operations, management of those devices, the keys themselves. Is there a way to do some type of alignment or improvement on how that currently works? The answer is yes. Time will tell what exactly that looks like. But in terms of P2P, that'll probably be, and is anticipated to be, the most prominent factor in the P2P v4 revision effort. One example could be one set of requirements to rule them all. We don't know. It could be, and highly likely, an alternative to doing domain 5 for a period of time to allow that flexibility. You can kind of do this and it works, or you can continue to domain 5 as you have been, just to allow that sense of familiarity and that transition over time. It's very much in the initial stages, and like a broken record, but it's so important. Stakeholder engagement, stakeholder feedback, participation in RFCs, and all the other available channels that have been mentioned today and will be mentioned throughout this event are paramount to what we do here, and P2P is not the exception. So with that, I want to thank everyone for being here, for your continued participation, not just in the P2P Standard Program, but with the Council, and I hope everyone is nice and hungry and enjoys their lunch. Thank you.